Hello, listeners, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Green Living Chats podcast. I am your host, Daniel Hagen. As part of our endeavor to holistically define sustainability, we are very excited to present our special episodes on sustainability in space. And in these episodes, we are going to be talking with stakeholders in space science and how sustainability resonates in their work. In this series of episodes, we are going to talk with friends from the European Space Agency about space debris. Is there really trash in space? Today, we are really excited to have Dr. Tim Flohrer join us in this conversation on how the European Space Agency is practicing sustainability in space through their Zero Debris initiative. Dr. Tim Flohrer leads ESA's Space Debris Office and has done this since 2020. He has been working on space debris matters since 2001, which led him to joining the Space Debris Office at ESA as an engineer in 2007. He is working for ESA's Space Safety Program and leads activities addressing the development of technologies for monitoring the space debris environment and related risk assessments. He is responsible for operational collision avoidance activities, for re-entry predictions, and for providing satellite missions in all phases with space debris mitigation analysis. What an exciting background, right? So we are very excited to have Dr. Tim Flohrer in this conversation, and we hope that you are also going to enjoy it. Here we go. Hello, listeners. Thank you very much for joining us. Did you know there's rubbish in space? So we are going to talk about that. We are looking at sustainability in space. And this is also a very important thing with all the satellites going up and a lot of things going into space. Someone has to be concerned about what is happening there. And the European Space Agency is very concerned about that. And so we are going to have a series of talks with the European Space Agency. And this is just a snippet of it. Today we have Dr. Tim Flohrer. He is the head of the Space Debris Office at the European Space Agency. Hello, Tim. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you. How are you?
Very, very good. Thank you so much for being with us. And we are really excited to have you on. There are so many questions that we really want to ask, but one of the things we want to know is about your story, how everything began for you. So before we talk about ESA, we want to know who you are, just a little bit about your background. Feel free to go as far back as possible. How did you end up here in the Space Debris Office? So we want to sort of get to know a little bit of that journey.
Yeah, trying to go back as much as possible. I can maybe go to my 4-year-old version that was very much interested in everything related to trash and to the trucks taking the trash from the street. But okay, since then, I did a bit of a different career. I studied actually geodesy, which is the science about the shape and measuring the earth. I did this in Dresden, in Germany, and then worked in industry as a software developer for aircraft. And then had the opportunity to go back to university, Switzerland, working on optical observations acquired with telescopes in Tenerife in Spain. That was very, very nice work, also spending a lot of nights on the observatory, which I enjoyed very much. And that brought me in contact with the topic of space debris. So the rubbish that you're introducing, we call it debris, but it's actually everything that is no longer functional. And there I developed some software. I was involved in searching and finding new objects there, very much on the technical side, and then went to Darmstadt, Germany, where ESA, the European Space Agency, has the operations center in 2007. And since then I'm here and switched gradually from the engineering side of life to the more managerial side of life. And there we are now in 2024.
Wow. That's quite a story. It's always interesting how we can trace we can trace back what we are doing now to, some things we were interested in the past. So yeah, as we build on that closer to our topic, I guess the first thing, you've already started doing that. You already started talking about it, but we want to have a clear definition. So what is space debris? Even before that, you could feel free to tell us a little bit about what is ESA, what is the European Space Agency? Give us a brief introduction to the European Space Agency, and then also go into what space debris is.
Yeah, so space debris, according to a definition that is widely used, is everything that we put in space of artificial origin and no longer functional. And with this definition, you see it can be anything ranging from very big upper stages of several tons to satellites that are disposed. And that's a major concern and growing concern to fragments thereof. So little pieces from decimeters to centimeters down to micrometers that explosions or collisions have left behind. And with that, you see it's a purely generated environmental problem that we started to build up in 1957 with the launch of the first satellites. Even then, already we left an upper stage behind that became space debris from the very beginning. Wow. So the population of space debris has been growing since then continuously, and that with that and the growing use of space for a lot of day-to-day applications, it's also a massively growing concern. You mentioned already this is something we have to address on the topic of sustainability, because we have to care about the long-term evolution of this problem.
Yeah.
But it also has short-term consequences to the safety of operating satellites there. And collision avoidance or the coordination of space traffic is maybe just a topic we may address later on. Now, you asked also about ESA. So ESA, the European Space Agency, became aware of this problem already in the 70s when the first research papers were published by NASA colleagues predicting a runaway scenario where we have more and more debris created from a cascading chain of events. And that was researcher Donald Kessler who predicted this to happen. Since the 80s, we have active research in the European Space Agency on that. We have developed models. We have developed also technology to observe debris, to count it, to assess the consequences, so how to protect satellites, to minimize the effects, and to have means for mitigating the consequences or mitigating also the creation of further debris. And we have our own policy, which is our ESA internal law. ESA is an intergovernmental organization in Europe, combining several European countries. And we have our own framework, the policy of space debris aspects. And that has been continuously evolving. And the last and massive step in that was last year when we revised this policy and put into perspective a goal that we have that is called zero debris by 2030. And in terms of space projects, 2030 is around the corner. So it's really a stretching goal. And we are very actively now working on implementing that, developing the technology to make this happen. We're also reaching outwards. So ESA has formed a community and facilitates discussion in this community that resulted in a zero debris charter document that has just been signed a few weeks ago by the first countries and by the first companies who share that goal. And the pace is now in implementing that to make.
This is probably just a personal feedback on what you said, because I've also thought about it for a while, which is that I think of the conservation of matter, and I know that space is still part of our universe, right? And I'm thinking of the materials that are exiting the Earth and that are not returning. We are concerned about how space debris affects operations in space. But do you think that materials going up and not coming down have some kind of conservation effect on on the Earth? I mean, this is just a personal question that I'm wondering if it's something you think about.
For sure, not all consequences are fully understood. Okay. That's why we think that mitigating space debris is the best way. What you cannot mitigate, we then require also to take it back, to remove it. So we are actively developing technologies for remediating the environment. We are very busy with that. But you're right, we have to really see two sides of the coin. Yeah? The short long-term effects. That is day-to-day work in operations. So I'm at the operations center. We daily have close approach warnings. We do collision avoidance daily. And we also have the prediction that this will go up with the deployment of large constellations and more satellites going there. Even if we can achieve the goal that we have no fragmentation, I think it's not possible, unfortunately. But we still see the increase of the active space traffic. But this is only one side. The other side of the coin is the long-term consequences. So preservation of the environment. And there's an interesting concept that we put forward, is to introduce the concept of a capacity of the orbital environment, so that it can only keep a certain amount of satellites. And by either improving your disposal statistics and or by improving your knowledge of the situation, where your objects are, you can then, of course, also make this use of the limited resource more efficient, which is very interesting. But we also think that this concept of a capacity allows also regulators in the future to better steer how the environment is used, with the goal of long-term sustainability, so that also in the future we can define a goal of the environment, of the state of the environment, that we can still use it also in the future. Because I think, honestly, we have a mandate to make this possible also for future generations. Nobody should consume more than what is absolutely necessary. And I think space debris is there a problem that is in a way not different to other environmental problems.
You're talking about operations because you are also over there in the operations center. And so I think one of the things that might help people to understand the importance of really taking into account what is happening in terms of space debris is, how does it affect operational activities in space? At least from my point of view, satellite operations, right? But I'm sure there are other operational activities in space that space debris might interrupt. So, I mean, does it interrupt something like observation of meteorites or other celestial bodies?
Yeah, in the end, it affects everything we use space to provide applications and services. So space debris not too much cares whether your application is navigation, telecommunication, Earth observation, or science. Space debris makes no difference. All missions are affected by that. And there are regions in space which are more affected by space debris. So it's a bit like on Earth, there are regions where you have more traffic and you find more rubbish, as you introduced it. So in space, unfortunately, we are not behaving differently. In the day-to-day work, it's the following. I mean, we have to screen our planned orbits, our trajectory, where we are going with our satellites, for close approaches with other objects there, which cannot maneuver anymore. So the space debris objects. Once we get in our prediction close to one of these objects, we assess the risk that we are at the same point at the same time. And that's to be avoided because we would have a collision. So it's a probabilistic scenario. And we see, as I said, in some regions, a level that is quite high, because when we exceed the threshold, then we decide to change our trajectory. So we get out of the way, then we pass safely, and we go back. And as you can see, this requires quite a number of planning, analysis. And as it's related to celestial mechanics, it doesn't care about weekends, it doesn't care about holidays, it's a 24/7 thing. There is always the feeling that most of these events happen on the weekend. It's not true, unfortunately. But yeah, it can happen at any day, and it doesn't matter whether it's your birthday.
All right.
Okay, but safety of the mission is our prime goal, and we have to ensure that. So we have to be ready to react. It gets quite interesting if you get close to an object that is also active, because then you come into the question of how do you coordinate your actions. So you would, of course, want to avoid that both objects change the trajectory in a direction where they are still on a collision course. So you have to talk to the other party, and that is rather a new scenario, because in the past there were not so many active objects. But now in some regions, we have to say that the majority of the close approaches is actually with active objects. So we come to very interesting questions of negotiating who does what. Because keep in mind, there are no traffic rules yet. So this has to come with it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So looking at traffic with both active and inactive objects in space, that's I guess that I'm thinking of how this sort of self-driving technology might be implemented in space somehow to deal with navigating active objects in space so that they don't collide into other objects. I guess it's probably something that ESA is probably working on to deal with.
Yeah, it's not
Maneuver.
only us who have the problem. Any operator is affected by the problem. But what we
Yeah.
are really working on is to make the technology available that you can automate it as far as possible, so that it keeps the effect on your operations, on the
Yeah.
costs
Yeah.
at the manageable level.
Yeah.
We unfortunately see that the efforts of keeping the mission safe is increasing now drastically. So more and more work is required, more and more events happen.
Yeah.
For some of our objects, in particular those in low Earth orbit, so this is everything below 2,000 kilometers, we see that we have to maneuver 2-3 times per year per satellite.
Wow.
Now, if you see that we have at the moment a bit more than 20 satellites, and we also prepare for more cases than we actually maneuver because our information gets better over time, but we have to plan ahead. Yeah? So consider the Earth, yeah? And then you start implementing. You see that we constantly are preparing maneuvers for one of our satellites. And that means you have also a lot of costs that you have to keep in mind for the operation of satellites. That's the unfortunate truth. And we can project that it will not go down.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Before we go into ESA's strategies to reach zero space debris, I was just thinking, I'm sure that the issue of space debris also has to do with who owns space, right? Because do I only clean my junk, or I mean my rubbish, or do I also clean someone else's, something like that? How does that picture look like for the space debris office?
Yeah, unfortunately, coming back to my 4-year-old, there is no truck that is going around and taking away the trash that you or others may leave behind, and there's also no public service of cleaning up space. This we don't have, and also when it comes to the law, to the space law is quite vague when it comes to space debris. The international law comes from the 70s and from the 80s, where this was not so much seen as a problem.
Yeah.
And now the topic of space debris finds its way slowly into the national space legislation, but then, of course, you may have the differences between the regulatory regimes. Where we are making a bit more progress is international standards, international guidelines, which are non-binding. There are some groups like the Interagency Space Debris Coordination Committee, the IADC, that combines the major space agencies, who then, by matter of consensus, try to define rules to avoid and deal with space debris. These guidelines then are taken up by standardization organizations like ISO, and this can then be standards that are applicable to missions. So you see, it's a rather complex setup, which in the end goes down to non-binding rules at the moment. So if you are a bad guy with your trash, I fear to say there's a lot of things you may be still allowed to do legally. However, it's not that I'm saying you should do this, because I mean everybody in this global problem of space debris is part of the solution as well. So we all have to solve this together, and that's something that we are.
Fantastic. Yeah. So ESA is working on a zero space debris policy. As we discussed the strategies that ESA is using to do that, first of all, is it a realistic goal, or do you see it as a realistic goal? And do you see the measures that ESA is taking to do that to also be realistic to bring us to that point? Or do you think we might need more time? Is the situation getting more complex? And is the policy dynamic enough to meet the complexity of how space science and engineering is changing with each year? Because I mean, with AI and new technology coming in, I'm guessing that it's not a very straightforward thing. The way we think of technology in space today will be very different in the next 2 years, right? So what strategies is ESA taking to really meet this zero space debris policy? And could you give us some examples of upcoming missions that would be taking this into account?
Yeah. Where are we coming from? So we're coming from a situation where we see more and more space traffic. We see launch rates coming from, let's say, a few hundred objects being launched just a couple of years ago, and now we are launching more than 2,000, 2,500 objects per year. Just to put
Wow.
it in perspective, when I started in the business, we had 1,000 active space objects overall. Yeah,
Wow.
and the forecast is that these 2,500 will at least remain at this level, if not going up, if we see
Mm,
multiple constellations. In parallel, we see a scenario where everybody of us is depending in her daily life on space as
yeah,
a resource. We're all
yeah,
using space technology. Either we know it
yeah,
or not, but we use it. We
yeah.
use navigation to find our ways. We rely
Mm,
on better weather forecasts now, which use a lot of space data. We
yeah,
are globally connected every day using space also for telecommunication. We
yeah.
rely when it comes to disasters from the nature to on services and help organize through space technology.
Mm.
Even financing is using space to synchronize the trading platforms, and there's a lot of
Oh,
other hidden places where space plays a role. So in short,
yeah.
we have growing space traffic
Mm,
and lower prices to access space, and also with that a much higher dependency on space applications in our day-to-day life. And now, of course, we have to deal with space debris in
mm,
order to our civilization using space, and we
yeah,
also still want to do science. Yeah, so
yeah,
let's not forget about this. Even it's not the majority anymore.
yeah.
I still believe in the power of scientific exploration
Mm,
of space, also to motivate
mm,
and be curious about the things
yeah.
around us. So, with our zero debris approach that found its way into our internal policy, it's now applicable to all upcoming ESA missions that we are developing. Things
Okay.
that are there are for best efforts, but for everything that we start now is the new approach. You're right. It's a quite ambitious and stretching goal, but this is our role as engineers and scientists to make this happen,
Mm,
to develop the technology together with our industry in Europe.
yeah.
And we want to arrive at a situation where the technology is available so that it's ready for use by everybody. So we also have the goal of inspiring others to follow our approach. That's why we
Mm,
have also the charter document, where we
yeah.
have already more than I think 12 countries and 40 entities who signed it, and even more are queuing up to support us. And these are
Mm,
a number of very well-known European industrial partners. To give you some examples of what we did is we make it mandatory to have a process for collision avoidance in place so that you are ready to take up the information and process it. We limit the orbital lifetime to a maximum of 5 years, or
okay.
if you exceed a certain fragmentation risk, even less than that. So the goal is to get out of orbit. We ask missions to prepare to be serviced. So I mean, approached with a removal vehicle in case they have a fail on orbit. And we have
Mm,
quite clear targets on the reliability of the missions,
okay.
just to name a few. Also, we tackle the topic of risks during re-entry. So what is the risk on ground if you go back? So the goal is to do controlled deorbits, so in areas where there's no risk on ground,
Mm,
and also to demise, to burn up, so to say, in the atmosphere to reach clearly defined thresholds. These are just a few examples that are there. We
mm,
also have said that we revise our requirements in 26 and in 29. So
okay.
we don't see them as static. We have also
Okay.
foreseen that we take pace with the evolution of how we use the environment, so to
Yeah.
adapt our
Yeah.
requirements as well. And I think this is a very important message as well. Future use of space is also possible. And yes,
Mm,
again, it's a stretching goal. It's challenging, but
mm.
I think we have no other choice than to go for it.
Fantastic. Just a sort of a slight detour. We are going to talk. We are going to be talking about the Aeolus story in a different episode. But I'm wondering, how did that motivate or inspire the Space Debris Office at ESA? I mean, when that happened, was that like a green light that's, oh, we can really do this, or did that sort of inspire you guys in a different way, or give you some encouragement with what you plan to do?
Of course, the assisted re-entry of Aeolus was very nice success, especially as we went far beyond what was originally foreseen. It was to
Yeah.
demonstrate that if you work as a team, if you work together for a common goal, there's much more than you can achieve. But can also maybe go back a few more years in time. There was the satellite ERS-2, where we also did more than what was possible. ERS-2 was not prepared to lower the orbit, was not required to meet the orbital lifetime limitation, but we did that. And also at that time, we went beyond what is possible in a number of other cases. But to really say this, I mean, Aeolus was a really, really nice example of what is possible. It was a huge team that was involved, and it was really cool. And I can only recommend to your listeners to join the podcast for the specific feature on Aeolus.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy that it created a very good atmosphere at ESA. So we already spoke a little bit about, the problem of, well, who owns the rubbish or the debris in space and who is taking care of it. And I'm guessing that this is definitely correlated to the kinds of challenges that you are having as ESA to deal with space debris. So could you tell us some of the challenges that you are having? And also, if you could keep in mind that there are young scientists who are listening, who might be listening for ideas, sort of, okay, how can I help, in their own small corners? If there is something they should, a career path that they can pursue, whatever you say might inspire them. So what are the challenges that ESA is facing and in enforcing compliance with space debris mitigation, especially, since you have to deal with governmental stakeholders and then private stakeholders as well. It's definitely not easy negotiating between the two kinds of stakeholders, but also, as young scientists and engineers out there, what do you think we could also be doing to contribute to helping ESA's challenges in this area?
Yeah, first and foremost, I observe similarly as you that technology and regulating policy are not evolving at the same speed. And we have to make everything possible that the technology and the policy at least stay somewhat aligned, and we regulate what is required to regulate, but we also have the technology considered in the update of the regulation. So I think this is something for everybody to consider here. Still with the goal to keep space accessible and also space to be exploited for scientific purposes, but also for commercial purposes. It's not that we want to kill business. No, we want to preserve the business also for the future generations. Now, for some pressing needs, and where I think young researchers can focus on, there's such an amount of topics. I would certainly go well beyond the time we have here, but maybe to focus on some areas that I see in my day-to-day work here as sticking out, but this is a personal selection. We have a quite poor understanding of how our atmosphere, our upper layers of the atmosphere, are reflecting the activity of the sun. So the density of this atmosphere is varying, and with that puts a lot of uncertainty in our collision avoidance forecasts. So when we predict the positions of our satellites over several days, we have to take this into account, and that is really limiting what we can do and how we can plan. We also want to know much better where these space debris objects are. We want to measure them precisely. In the past, we have developed radar and telescope technologies to do that, but still we want to get better on that. We want to know more precisely where they are, and we want to have data systems, computer systems, and services that can predict this environment nicely. We want to use more technology, and when we build satellites, of course, satellites get smaller and smaller, but we still want to track them. We want to have propulsion systems that are available even for the smallest satellites so that they can maneuver. We want to bring autonomy, onboard autonomy in so that the satellites can also organize to some extent themselves in coordinating their avoidance maneuvers. We want to look at the topic of re-entry. We want to have materials that still can do everything we want to do with the satellites, but then do not put a risk on ground. We want to understand what these re-entries do with the upper layers of the atmosphere. This is also a burning topic. And maybe as a last one, we also want to know how we can remove residual energy on board when the satellite reaches the end of life. So residual fuel or batteries.
Yeah.
So there's a number of things that we can address, but this is by far not the complete list. And keep in mind, these are the technical sides of the coin,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
regulatory and legal side is a different story.
Yeah. 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 Well, I think you just described about 7 PhD thesis.
Or more.
Yeah, yeah. You've stated quite a number of scientific challenges and potential solutions that could be going to them. How about in terms of policy development and policy regulation? What are some of the challenges, not just for ESA, but because ESA will have to work with other organizations to deal with this, and so you may not say so much about it, but let's say one or two of your biggest challenges that you think you're currently facing with this.
Yeah, it's a global problem, and you're right in saying that requires a global solution in terms of the applicable policies. Now, I'm not sure whether the international law will come in time to address this pressing challenge. So we may find a way through guidelines, through national legislation, that the topic of space debris is addressed. There's certainly interest from the major stakeholders, and with our zero debris approach, we have one example that we do in ESA. With the charter document, we have a community goal. So it's not an ESA goal, it's a community goal that comes with clear 5 objectives, even including numbers in this charter document. And I can encourage everybody to have a look at that document. And I think if we could implement all this, what is targeted there, we would already make a major step forward. And that would be really what I would be hoping for. And yeah, the spirit is, of course, mitigate space debris before it's there. That I think will not change. So everything that is not existing, you don't have to worry about. And then make the technology for removing the largest space debris objects reality, making it also possible that at end of your life, in case you have a failure, and failures of your satellites may still happen in the future as technical systems, but then you may have hopefully a service available that can help you to get out of orbit. And by that, we maintain the capacity also for future missions. I think this is the main approach that we should follow from my perspective here. And overall, if everybody else, so every individual, every person that is using space, and that is all of us, is aware of the topic of space debris, and in the case you're procuring a service or you're subscribing to something, you keep in mind maybe checking whether space debris was considered. That would certainly be a cherry.
Yeah, that would be very nice. I think it will be very nice that people are very aware, and not just in terms of knowledge, but really changing some kind of lifestyle practices to somehow affect sustainability in space. So yeah, here at GLC, we understand that sustainability is not a problem. First of all, it's not a one-dimensional problem, it's a multi-dimensional problem. And the solutions for it is also a multi-dimensional solution. And so when we talk about sustainability, it's a very big word that has to be broken down into several components for us to gradually deal with it. So we are very happy to be having sustainability in space as also a discussion here. As we draw towards the end of our discussion here, I know you've already said a couple of things, but I would really want you to target young scientists and engineers who are thinking of careers in space. From your own example and people you've spoken to, what advice can you give to them about how they should think about, career in space science? What they should be, first some encouragement for them to get into the career. Because I remember that when we went to ESTEC, one of the things that was said by the director there was that we're having fewer and fewer people interested in space science. And I was very surprised to hear that, because I mean, in my in my community of friends, we are all sort of crazy nerds about space, and I think it's sad to hear that statement. But so you could encourage someone through this podcast to pick up a career. What would you like to tell people who might be thinking about something like this? Yeah.
Okay, with all bluntness and all embarrassing I'm causing, when I graduated from university, I had no clue about space debris. But I discovered this very quickly when I started with working with telescope data, and I found these moving dots in the images, and I wondered what this is about. And so my main point for all students is stay curious about things and ask why. And with that, you will discover a lot of opportunities, and then don't be shy to take the opportunity. If this is the subject of space, absolutely welcome. I can only encourage everybody to go in this direction. Space has enormous growth in the forecast. There's a lot of things to do, not necessarily only on space debris, despite I would love to see you working on that topic as well, but I'm maybe a bit biased. But we all depend on our day-to-day lives on that. It allows us to do very, very nice things. And not only about going to other planets and explore them, which is absolutely stellar and really cool. And I love to do this part of my job, but also in the day-to-day work to ensure that we have telecommunication and we have navigation. This is something that affects everybody. And who could say this in his job or her job? So go for it. You don't have to study aerospace engineering necessarily. In my team, of course, there are aerospace engineers, but the majority is not. We have physicists, mathematicians, electrical engineers. We have people who study other types of engineering. Any engineering will have a link to space. So simply stay curious, take the opportunities and go for it. That's what I can encourage.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I was actually just about to say, could you tell us a bit of the background of the people in your office? But so I'm happy that you've you've elaborated that. So that's really nice, and I'm sure that people will be encouraged by that. As we bring the conversation to an end, is there anyone you would like to appreciate, acknowledge, or give a shout out to on this?
Yeah, one thing about space is always and every time teamwork. So you cannot achieve anything alone. And with that, I'm so grateful to have such a nice team here. We are working together, many of us, for really quite some time. We spent also long projects, so there's quite a heritage with many people. And the community is really nice, and it's always good to meet old colleagues, new colleagues in different occasions. And I would like to very much appreciate my team here, but also the teams in industry I'm working on, the other ESA teams. And that is really a highlight in my life, to have this international setting every day. And that's what I'm very grateful for.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tim. It's been an exciting and eye-opening experience for me, and I'm sure for the listeners as well. And so it's very nice that we are handling a different aspect of sustainability, which we haven't even done on this podcast. So thank you, ESA, for launching this sustainability in space discussion here on GLC. And we hope that is going to bring more people to be interested in what is going on at ESA, to be interested in what is going on at space, and also to make it a part of their life, and to realize that the phones that they hold in their hands are working with objects in space. And so they have to be concerned about space debris. So thank you so much, Tim. Thank you so much for being with us, and we hope to connect more with you.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Daniel. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us in this episode of Sustainability in Space and our conversation with Dr. Tim Flohrer from ESA. We hope that you have enjoyed it, and we hope that this has given you some motivation and encouragement for what is happening in space. The concept of sustainability really does matter everywhere. So join us in our next episodes, where we have more discussions with the European Space Agency on this topic. And until then, keep living green.